So, I wanted to talk today about shame. I think that shame is something that can really keep us stuck. So, the way I grew up, um, like I said before, I came from a pretty unstable home. So, really, no one was like kind of in my corner encouraging me with my talents or things like that. Um, I'm the oldest of three girls, so I was almost, especially I would say by age 11 or 12, kind of thrust into a motherly way of needing to, cook meals and um, kind of just a lot was put on me more than should have been. Um, I also would have experienced sexual molestation as a young child. Um, so obviously that was impacting me with, in ways, even though it was definitely something I wasn't aware of, very, very much. Um, Memories of that would have really actually only surfaced after I left my spouse that I am almost divorced from. It's been 2 years separation. So started being flooded with memories of, I feel like I always knew that something had happened in that regard, but I didn't know who. And now I know who. But it's an awful long time ago because I'm 45 and I would have been about 2. So a lot of things impacted me in my childhood. A lot of things were not what they should have been. And as I became an adult and then had this like Christian experience, I can see now on the other side of Christianity that there was a lot of shame in my past, and Christianity, like my channel's not about anti-Christianity, but my experience has been, the whole idea of like, being like original sin or, that we're so wicked. To me, it made sense because of my past. And so when you have, once I became a teenager, I really acted out. I got in with the wrong crowd. Um, you know, what they say, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It wasn't rock and roll, it was R&B, hip hop. But running with the wrong crowd and, becoming promiscuous, acting out, which honestly feels very normal when you're a teenager, and it seems like everyone else you're going to school with is doing those things. And in fact, that's how I would have been introduced to those things, is when I went to like a girlfriend's house as a 11 or 12-year-old and was, kind of introduced to like, oh, this is my boyfriend and, we're having sex. And I was like pretty naive and I was like, oh, okay. And so, it wasn't too long and once I had friends that were doing those things, that I also started doing those things. And I feel like it's very common, even more so in our culture today. Like when I look at adolescents in our culture, I feel like probably more people are growing up the way that I did. I mean, I know there are exceptions. I know there are people who have strong homes and parents who are there for them, and really like are teaching them a lot of things, teaching them about boundaries, teaching them about, just a lot of things. But for me, like there wasn't that. There wasn't really anything being taught to me except for kind of like my peers. So there was a lot of acting out and a lot of things that, of course, I regret. And those things impacted me. And honestly, like I got pregnant at 14, which is not anything that I'm proud of. My mom asked me if the boy was black or white, and I told her he was black. And she told me to pack my bags, and she kicked me out. And I was so young, of course, that like I had my best friend, her family took me in, and then I ended up having a miscarriage about 3 months into the pregnancy, which crushed me because honestly, I wanted that baby because I wanted someone to love. There was a lot of lack of love in my upbringing, and I had a lot of love. I think we all internally have a lot of love to give. So of course all of that isn't healthy. But I ended up having a miscarriage. My mom then wanted me to move back home, which was really hard for me to accept because although I couldn't keep living with my friends, my friend and her family forever, and my mom didn't even give any money to them, which my mom, I don't know, my friend ended up commenting to me later that her family had been surprised by that. Like there was not even any monetary support. But I'm kind of probably not staying on track. I'm doing this very improv. I feel like that's kind of how I share the best. It's just, it's not going to be scripted. But I had a miscarriage, moved back home. There's still a lot more acting out. And then basically when I met my now husband, soon to be ex-husband, I was 18 and I got pregnant at 19 and we got married, like I said in my first video. So it was kind of just a progression. I was just older. I was just a grown up, but it was the same stuff. Going to the club, once I was old enough to do that. I was never really into drinking. I did smoke weed when I had boyfriends who did do that, but not much. I was always scared of anything harder than that. I have friends who were definitely doing LSD and things, and I was like, but which, I think that was good for me that I didn't do those things. But there was just so much shame. I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of things that it's not to not own it. I own it, and actually, I don't have shame for it now. Like I've worked through it. But what I mean is, when I became a Christian, the whole idea of like being a sinner and being so bad, it made so much sense for me, much more than someone who maybe grows up in a sheltered, protected environment where they are loved and nurtured and protected from maybe a lot of things that I wasn't. So to me, I felt like when Paul says like he was the chief of sinners, like that definitely was how I felt, like more than I could ever even express to anyone, like yes. So shame, ultimately me staying in a abusive marriage for 23 to 24 years before I filed for divorce after being a Christian. So it was 26 years of marriage so far, but like 23, 24 years of being a Christian, and almost feeling like, in a way, I was deserving of being treated in the abusive manner, because not that I really thought I deserved it, but because it's like, well, look, this is the fruit that I bore from living the completely whatever loose, whatever, like debauchery, however you want to say, life that I had lived as a teen. Shame. I always felt that God had removed my sins as far as the east is from the west. What I would find as I tried to share my testimony as a Christian, I always shared very little. But anytime you have any kind of sexual history, there's so much judgment in the churches. And I feel like I came to understand after a very short time that I just either couldn't really share my testimony of how I came to Christ and, what I thought he had really done for me. It just was too much for these church folk. Now that I'm not a Christian, and now that I left the marriage, and then a year and a half later realized that I no longer believe the Bible. I believe the Bible actually kept me stuck in abuse. So I don't believe the Bible. I don't believe these things that I've held to for all these years. I realized that the kind of a foundation that was laid was shame. I was carrying a lot of shame. I was shamed by church leaders and the spouse that, like I said before, that it was me, that I was the problem. And I didn't really believe that to be true on a lot of levels, but I believed that I was somehow still suffering. Our sins are removed, but it's like I'm still suffering the consequence of my sin as a youth. And now, even like with gay rights and those kind of things, like I was always very fanatically so against those things, but it's like I have some of that in my past. I was never a lesbian, but I messed around. I did a lot of things, like just kind of a crazy teen life, and I'm not proud of those things, whether they would be with men or male or female. But the point being is, like, almost like the pendulum swinging. Like, I thought that stuff is so wrong because I've experienced it. Like, oh, I'm just like the most wicked person in the world. And now it's like coming full circle. I don't think everything is so wrong. Like, it actually makes sense that I was looking for love when it wasn't found in my home with my mom and dad, or I know my grandmother. I know that my mom loved us the best she could, and I know my maternal grandmother loved us, but she died when I was 11. So it's like it's very natural to try to find love, and when you're a child, you can't really know to the extent that things like trauma and all these things are affecting you. But I feel like it took me coming out of Christianity to be rid of the shame and just kind of taking a different perspective of, it's not that, like, I did a lot of bad things, but it's not like it didn't make a lot of sense from the foundation that I was lacking in my home. Like, those things make sense, and I'm not such a bad person that I have these things in my past. And actually, I've been an overcomer my whole life. So it's like, even the shame that continued as I tried to share my testimony of coming to Christ by, like, other Christians, maybe Christians who were raised in a Christian home, just couldn't fathom. And I was not in any way sharing the things I'm sharing on this video. Like, I was not sharing that it was such a G-rated version of my testimony. But even with what I did share, there was so much shame, and I could feel it. That's another thing I've learned really quite recently, is this idea of, like, the energy that we carry. Like, I'm sure that my energy was being siphoned by these people that were, whether they were the ones molesting me or the people that I was acting out with. Like, all of these things, like, really affect you. So it's like realizing that I'm not worse than anybody could expect to be in the predicament that my childhood and then coming up into adulthood became. Just kind of like just being okay with it. It's like, what, this is my past. Just like someone who has been an alcoholic, or has been, like, a heavy drug user or something, or has been whatever, a prostitute, or whatever it would be. Like, it's like, yes, and, like, you can just stop judging me by those things. I've come through so much, and I always felt like I could relate to just anybody, the homeless person on the street that, like, maybe is a heavy drug user or whatever. It's like, I'm not better than them. And I think in Christianity, at least in the circles I was in, there's a lot of judgment, and there's a lot of shaming to people who, like, don't have it together. And although all those things had ceased in my life once I was married, like, I was faithful to this husband who was an unfaithful husband to me, but nonetheless, it's like, my character kind of has always been in question by others because of the things in my past. And it's like, that's not, like, I've overcome, and so just, I don't know, just kind of, there are things, the things that I'm even sharing today, is like, there are so many things that I have kind of put away as if in a box in the closet, and I don't really talk about these things, and I haven't been open because I learned in these Christian circles to even speak of any of it was like, oh, you're, you know, it was almost like women would look at me sideways, like, oh, you know, I could almost see it on their, I am very intuitive. I can almost perceive that they started maybe seeing me as a threat, that maybe I would want to pursue their husbands, or, you know, it's like all these things. And it's like, as a Christian, I remember thinking to myself, I felt those things from people, and I would think to myself, it's almost like they don't even believe the gospel. They almost don't believe that I'm like washed white as snow and my sins are removed, you know, as far as the east is from the west. Like, I felt those things. I felt those judgments and condemnations, and I knew I wasn't going to do those things. I knew that I was as upright as they come, but with a, you know, less than desirable past. But I still felt the shaming from others, and a lot of shame surrounding the decision of me leaving this spouse, and to decide that, you know, I'm no longer going to stay in the situation that is basically killing me emotionally. You know, I mean, talk about being emotionally unfulfilled, but just, yeah, just with all the trauma and everything which I've worked through now in the last couple of years, and I'm just a completely different person now. I'm back to being me. I'm the healthiest me I've been ever in my life, and I just, you know, anything that you've ever done, like, it's okay, you know, move on, work through it, look at it, don't hide it away in the closet, you know, don't put it on the shelf and in the shoebox and tuck it away, you know, metaphorically. Look at it. And there's probably reasons, very valid reasons. People who become like drug users or alcoholics, like, often they have been harmed. They often have come from unstable homes, and there are real reasons why we turn to things that are addictive to try to get our needs met, to try to feel love, or to feel safe, or to shut out and like almost numb out that we aren't. It's okay, you know. And there's mechanisms, you know. I feel like even with our brain, there's mechanisms. Our brain is constantly trying to which is kind of when you get into manifesting. It's like I didn't learn about manifesting until in the last 6 months, but it's like what we think and the way our brain is always trying to, like, if we think that we're, oh, I'm such a wicked person, our brain is gonna like find the evidence to make that be true, and we're gonna like be very critical of ourselves. And if others in our you know, sphere of friends and family are critical of us as well, it's like we're gonna kind of continue manifesting negative things. But it's like once you work through the shame, and once you let go of people in your life who seem to kind of like judge you or think wicked, bad of you, and you get those people out, and you put your boundaries up, and you set limits to what, like, you know what, you can't really speak into my life. You can think whatever you want about me, but it's not going to break through this barrier in my mind or in my heart any longer. And I know who I am. I know what I am. I know the integrity that I move from and have for most of my adult life. You know, and it's like, whatever your judgment is on me and whatever I've done in the past and however bad I even deem it to be, it's like, you know, there are reasons, and it's okay. And so I think if we would all do that, even if you grew up in a religious home of any sort and you were sheltered and protected, like I've over-sheltered my children so much, it's like, it's really not healthy, which I'm not doing that any longer, but it's like I was very pendulum swing, you know, oh, they're not gonna, you know about this stuff, I'm gonna protect them. It's like, you know what, that doesn't actually work. It just causes different results that are still negative. And so I'm no longer trying to overprotect and over-shelter, but no matter what you have in your past, like, it's okay. And you just need to look at it and own it and work through it and not be ashamed of it, and letting shame go. So if you want to say forgive yourself, but if you want to just, it's not even about forgiving yourself necessarily, it's just more about like owning and saying, like, this is the truth, this is what happened, this is the why, maybe, you know, this was the lack, this is the way I acted out, this is the way I survived all those years. And then it's like, okay, and this is me, here I am, you know, take it or leave it, love or hate, but I'm gonna love myself. And the people who are going to be on my inside group whenever that starts happening are going to be the ones that fully accept and fully love me and see me for who I am, and see, like, despite anything in my past, that I'm an overcomer and I have a heart of gold. My heart is not desperately wicked above all else. No, my heart is gold, good. That doesn't mean I'm perfect, of course. I still raise my voice sometimes at my kids, I still lose my temper, still, you know, whatever, all the things. And so, you know, light and dark, you know, but a heart of gold. So letting go of shame, it's like, I am not ashamed any longer. I could freely speak on any of the things in my past because I am who I am despite all of those things, and they have only aided in my resilience. So letting go of shame is very key. And like I said before, loving yourself, being free from shame. Like, there's no shame, you know, it's all good, and it's only going to get better as I don't allow toxic people to you know, take from me or try to project on me what they think of me. It's like, no, I know who I am, and I know who I am despite all that I have been through. So let go of shame. All right, see ya.